During the invasion of Mars in Doom 2016, and then the subsequent invasion of every continent on Earth except for Australia for some reason, I guess because likely it's already hell on Earth down there, the creature would choose to hunt down humans in solitude with speed and ferocity well beyond the reaction times as well as processing capability of the human brain. This would end up leading to the falling of many soldiers in the battlefield as Earth's military force was slowly succumbing and consumed by these beasts. This demon known as the Prowler was much stronger than your average demon around them, but in no way completely invulnerable to attacks. That said, they had many advantages over their lesser cousins that will make them a real threat on the battlefield. So today we'll be discussing the evolutionary chain as well as the morphology of the Prowlers and try to figure out where they come from. As you make your way through the Doom Hunter's base, which we will be covering that in a later episode, you run across a creature possessing an agility not seen in the other demons. Now this is not to say that the other demons do not have agility of their own, but the Prowler is something different. Forsaking the pack mentality of its ancestors and hunting down the Slayer or humans for that matter, this creature will choose to stick to the shadows as it follows along, waiting for the right time to attack. This more conservative mentality allows it to stay hidden until a potential prey makes itself most vulnerable. When that opportunity presents itself, it is known to attack by quickly rushing in and slashing at a human's back. This slash attack for all but the most heavily armored would quickly pierce conventional armor, inducing severe spinal trauma and even possibly a complete severing of the spinal cord, leading to easy prey. With the Slayer, however, his armor is not like standard armor worn by humans and instead was forged by the Night Sentinels, who were, I hear, quite adept at combating demons for quite some time. This allows him a few more chances than what would be presented to a normal human or soldier, but the Prowler has another capability up its sleeve that can even counter the Doomslayer, at least to a certain degree. Upon realizing that its prey is still alive, the Prowler can slip away using a miniature hell portal, likely stemming from its own abundant hell energy. This portal can take it out of the area quickly as it teleports. Now, it would appear to be more by choice, but the Prowler can then re-enter the Earth's plane of existence, but it can also be assumed that if it, let's say, were heavily injured and did not want to continue the attack, it could choose to stay within the hell plane. Once back in Earth's dimension, it will begin to attack once more after it has retreated to the safety of the shadows or behind cover. Basically, anything that will break your line of sight. This ability appears to have come from the amount of hell energy that has been exposed to, which also presumably appears to have altered its morphology more heavily than those that are closely related to it, or may be that they actually both evolved, or really all three, from a common ancestor. This alteration has caused this creature to be much stronger than the other members and more likely what those other members turn into from a single progenitor in the family tree, or likely the other inhabitants of the planet it was on when the demons took over. And this has made it more lethal and powerful in the process and given it those advantages. But which specific demons is it related to, and how might these be pieced together, and really what sort of benefits does this have? Well, we will get there, but first we must cover its morphology as it lends some clues as to who it does come from. So you know where we gotta start as per usual. Starting with the feet, we see a creature that is fairly similar to the other demons in a lot of ways, possessing 3 toes, each tipped with a razor-sharp claw. This would obviously be used in attacks to a certain degree should they be grappling with prey on the ground after their attack, much like how a cat will use its hind legs to eviscerate prey. Likely this creature would do the same dragging of their claws on the prey's abdomen area. The structure in the foot supports a digitigrade leg as the tarsal bones do not appear to be really connected by an ankle, although they definitely are, but the tarsal bones do look like they just completely run into the tibia and fibia of the shin. One of the strange things about this demon is exactly how straight that these are that run into the shins and that relation to the feet. While other demons almost seem to sit back on their ankles, this creature in particular, the joints are joined at a straight line. Now, even though it chooses to stand like this, or really its body is structured to stand like this, those joints do still work, which means it can be agile when running because they do bend. But the shins in particular appear to be covered with an armor coating, which we will discuss a little later as we get to the arms. But the knees appear to be covered with another form of padding, protecting them from damage as they jump around and land from heights that if our knees were to hit the ground, they would basically just shatter into a bunch of splintery bone. The quadriceps of this creature are fairly muscular with slight armor coating on them as well. Much less of that than the other areas of the body, but definitely still present. This would protect the femurs from direct hits that may break them, but with the Doomslayer, this doesn't really matter. But you can see the armor plating jut up near the top of the pelvis at the apex of the thigh with the connection point to the pelvis. The pelvis is interesting as we see on the back of the creature it flares outward, suggesting that much like the Revenant, this creature experienced extreme bone growth following the exposure to the likely Lazarus wave, and this bone growth is also supported by the extreme sucked-in abdomen and hunched-over appearance of the Prowler, which means that it grew upwards more than its muscle could compensate. But moving to the abdomen, we see this creature is actually lacking a lot of armor. The abdomen appears to be completely exposed, seeing as the muscle is clearly visible under what appears to be normal skin. That said, the skin on this body would probably be fairly leathery based on appearance and reflection of light. This leather, however, however, would be thicker than, say, our skin, making it highly resistant to attacks with melee weapons or claws. That is, once again, unless you are the Doomslayer, then nothing is really all that resistant to you. Moving up to the chest, we can see the armor begin to pick back up. In fact, the chest is heavily armored. Around the bottom of the rib cage, it looks like a chitinous overgrowth has appeared to protect the internal organs of this area. Naturally, the body would protect this area anyhow, but after the hell energy exposure, it's ramped up to 11. The chest almost doubles in size of the abdomen, with the breastplate being a conglomeration of bone, chitinous material like found around the shins and thighs, and then leather skin. Moving up to the shoulders, we can see that the armor extends with a pinpoint in the middle around the areas of the anterior deltoids where a hole has formed in the armor, possibly needed for joint mobility. Around the trapezius muscle around the neck, we also see two bony protrusions on either side, which are likely used as a battering ram of sorts to impale prey or cause puncture wounds within them if they're larger. Moving down the arms, we see this creature actually has a small amount of muscle on its upper body relative to its chest. The biceps and triceps have very little armor coating, but also do possess more than what appears to be just leather skin like on the abdomen. As we continue down the arms, we see the forearms are covered in the same material that is seen on other parts of the body, with the added benefit of being sharper around the elbows, which can be used for jabbing. The hand exits its armor at the base, but the wrists are protected by an overgrowth on the top and sides. And speaking of hands, this creature possesses 3 fingers and 1 thumb, much like we see on a lot of other demons, but with that said, each finger is tipped with what appears to be the addition of bone, but it's actually the creature's naturally occurring phalangeal bones. However, the hell energy has caused them to become sharp claws, which can obviously be used for slashing and eviscerating, or just completely wrecking your brain's ability to communicate with your body by cutting your spinal cord into 5 distinct pieces. Moving around the back of this creature, we can see that it bears some resemblance to other creatures, with the vertebral column jutting out of the back of the leathery skin, providing sharp points in between the shoulder blades. On each shoulder blade is really more armor than is on the abdomen, but it does appear very thin in appearance. Moving up to the head, we see that the spine connects to the back of the skull, which will be important later, but getting a good look at the head, we can see that starting with the mouth, the lower mandible is actually cut down the middle. Likely this wasn't how it always was, but sort of with the energy, we kind of see with the other demons that the extended bone growth tends to crack the mandible, which is really to be expected. The mouth itself possesses many teeth, all exceedingly sharp. Cheekbones run up, and if you look closely, you can somewhat make out where this creature's eyes were originally, but it appears as though the skin has grown over them now, much like which happens with other demons and even has happened with humans. Instead, in the center of the skull, 3 lights can be seen that allow it to see in ways that is considered preternatural. This abnormal way of seeing, to its benefit, allows it to hunt effectively and likely see in ways that not only give it sight into our world, but allows it to see through the hell dimension as well, so that when it teleports, it's able to go where it wants within our plane of existence to make sure it doesn't just like run into a wall or even get stuck in a wall. Because the last thing we need is a step Doomslayer coming in when this thing's stuck in a wall. So anyways, the spikes at the top of the head further support this bone overgrowth idea, as the skull would likely not form in this way in any conditions. So getting a look at this thing, it should obviously remind you of imps. However, I don't believe this creature came from imps, but that an original species it came from may have all been the same. If you remember my imp episode, which was a while ago, and also the Archvile episode, which everyone read at because apparently it wasn't an Archvile despite being confirmed that it was Doom 2016's Archvile. I don't know, people got upset about it. Anyways, the idea is that these creatures may have been quasi-insectoid initially, and that's why we see this. Insect races on planets wouldn't actually be too far-fetched, considering insects have been on Earth almost since the beginning of life, roughly. And if you were really to compare who is the most successful species on Earth, it would actually be ants, not humans. Looking at the Prowler and comparing it to the imp, we begin to see that actually these creatures are exceedingly similar. There are a few differences: coloring, amount of toes, fingers on the hands are a bit different, but what it really comes down to is hell energy exposure. As we all know with the Revenants, more exposure equates to greater changes. This is why the zombie and soldier versions of humans exposed look entirely different from the Revenant. The same idea can be applied to imps. Initially, this creature would likely come from a bipedal creature, likely insectoid due to the chitinous armor found all over its body. The same lineage appears as though it would also produce the imps, however, there are varying levels of exposure. To add on to this ever-growing family of imps, it would also appear that the gargoyles are related in some way based on overall morphology, and I would also like to point out the vertebral column connecting at the back of the head of the gargoyle, but also connecting at the back of the head of the Prowler. But there will be a video actually covering the gargoyles more extensively, but based on the arms we see on the gargoyle and the discoloration of the skin on these forearms, this would mean that the armor was likely cut off so that the metal blade could be shoved into the forearm. The wings that form may mean that this creature originally had the ability to fly, but only some variants ended up keeping this. Another point towards being related to the imps is also the presence of the fireball, besides the fact that they look really similar. But this fireball production seems to be too similar, considering that the other demons don't really produce fireballs, more likely just to produce shock waves, unless you're the cacao demon. The Prowler produces purple fireballs, which, given what we know about the coloring of the eyes and energy produced based on that color, this would indicate that the fireball is more energetic. We can see, sort of like as an example, if we look at iron being smelted and worked, dark red is relatively cool, red is hotter, yellow is almost melting, and white is basically melted. The brighter the color on the visual spectrum, the higher the energy levels. So like a yellow sun versus a blue sun is way more energetic. So considering the spectrum has blues and purples, this would mean that a higher energy level is there in the Prowlers. So overall, this creature appears to me, based on an evolutionary marker, which can actually still exist after exposure to hell energy, that likely this species of demon comes from a single ancestor that was split into the imps, prowlers, and gargoyles. This diversification is to be expected if with the human race's own exposure events and physiological changes is anything to go off. With this exposure complete, unlike the imps who attack in packs, which may stem from a more hive-like nature, the prowlers will go off on their own, and although they lack the numbers, they're much more lethal in combat. Now, there are many ways to take out a prowler. Most involve removing the head from the body or inducing so much physical trauma that this creature has no choice but to stop moving. But the most brutal, however, can only and obviously be done by the Slayer. The Slayer will reach into the back of this creature, grab its spine, and remove it with the head attached. Man, that is pretty brutal.